Good evening, everyone. I'm PJ O'Neill, serving as Branch Chief for STEM Training and Youth Programs. Welcome to this month's Tech Talk, Fire Safety. The Tech Talks are sponsored by the U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary, and the Boy Scouts of America Sea Scout program. I'll be coordinating your questions after the presentation, but feel free to post questions in the chat box during the talk. Tech Talks are held on the fourth Tuesday of the month at 2100 Eastern Time. Next month's Tech Talk is Basic Plotting on March 22nd. Just a reminder, if you couldn't join us tonight, this Tech Talk is being recorded and will be posted to the Aux Scout YouTube channel, where it could be reviewed, shared with your shipmates, and used for training at your ship or flotilla. Our subject matter expert tonight is BOSN Chris Runt. A little bit about Chief Warrant Officer Runt. He began his Coast Guard career by enlisting from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1992. And after graduating recruit training in Cape May, New Jersey, he was assigned to the Coast Guard cutter Sitkinak in Key West, Florida, where he struck bosun's mate. While awaiting advancement to BM3, he was transferred to MSO Cleveland, then to Station Calumet Harbor in Chicago, Illinois. It was in Chicago where he certified as a boarding officer, OOD, and coxswain of the 41-foot utility boat. While stationed in Chicago, he was also awarded with the District 9 Search and Rescue Award. Upon advancing to bosun's mate second class and then to bosun's mate first class, he qualified as coxswain on several different types of platforms and eventually landed as the deck department head on the Coast Guard cutter Shamal homeported in Pascagoula, Mississippi. And that's where he earned his permanent cutterman's pin. Following this tour, he was assigned as the XPO Station Bell Island in Detroit, Michigan. That's the Executive Petty Officer, where he certified as coxswain on the response boat Small, Special Purpose Craft, Law Enforcement, and Special Purpose Craft Air, which is a pretty neat airboat if you've never seen one. Mr. Runt was promoted to Chief Warrant Officer and reassigned to Sector Baltimore. His following tour was as Commanding Officer of Aids to Navigation Team Philadelphia and the Aids to Navigation Officer for Sector Delaware Bay. Mr. Runt then returned to Baltimore with an assignment to Sector Maryland National Capital Region as the Aids to Navigation Officer and will retire from the Coast Guard this June after 30 years of service. A very warm welcome to BOSN Runt.
No, thank you, PJ, and thanks for having me. I'm just going to go ahead and start this PowerPoint that I have. Share the screen. Can you see that okay?
All good.
All right, thank you. So I'm just going to go through, came up with a quick PowerPoint with some videos in it, just to go through some of my experience in my career and some basics of firefighting. So first thing first, we need to make sure that the scene is safe before taking any actions. You want to make sure that the fire is something that can be handled by initial action. Before you do any of that, you need to call for assistance, whether it's with, 911, the Coast Guard, calling on the radio, but make sure that help is on the way, spread the word, and make sure everybody in the vicinity is aware that there's a fire. And of course, like I said, making sure that the scene is safe. I've got two cases in here that I've worked personally that'll kind of expand on that point. The first one, so this vessel you see there, the white one, that was a boat that had caught fire off of the coast of Puerto Rico. The engine room was secured, and the owner of the vessel thought that the fire was extinguished, which for the most part it was, but what had happened was they experienced what's called a backdraft. Basically, the heat was still there, the fuel is still there, but the oxygen isn't there to support fire. Those are the three things that you need to support a fire. There's also a chemical chain reaction, where some fire extinguishers will remove that as one of the key components of firefighting. In this case, everything was there except for the oxygen. So whenever the owner of the vessel opened up that engine room, it reintroduced oxygen very rapidly to the engine room and resulted in what's called a backdraft, which is where combustion had been taking place in a space, and then you allow an inrush of fresh air into that space, and it results in an explosion of flame. So, of course, when they opened up that engine room compartment on the deck, and that oxygen entered the space and the fire blew out, it blew out towards the person that opened the deck space, the hatch up, and it basically blew flame onto that person from the knees up, and he was severely burned over most of his body. That picture there was just when we were bringing him on board, and I have a video of backdraft training that was taking place in Wales. You might notice in the video that they spell backdraft different. It's just the English version of it. So hopefully this video plays. I'm going to skip through a lot of it, including the ads. So they're going to close these doors and the windows, seal the flames into that training building. And they leave it go, like you see, for quite some time, using up the oxygen that's inside that room. Now you can see on this window right here, you'll see the smoke puffs. Oh, I went too far. That's a backdraft. Were you able to see all of that, PJ?
Yes, we did catch it all.
Okay, I wanted to make sure that video worked. Okay, so one of the telltale signs of knowing that a backdraft is happening, I kind of skipped too far forward on that video, but you'd see the smoke kind of puffs in and out of the building. It looks like the building's breathing smoke. There won't be any smoke coming out of like the cracks along the windows, and then there'll be a puff of smoke, and then it kind of sucks that smoke back in again, and it really does look like a building is breathing. So that backdraft is very, very dangerous. And when you have a space like an engine room that can somewhat be sealed off, it's a very real threat. So after our hazards, I'm just going to go into a quick overview of classes of fire. So you have solid combustibles, which is your class A, is wood, paper, cloth, that sort of, if it's going to leave an ash, and usually it's white to gray colored smoke. Class B fires are your flammable liquids, so petroleums, gasoline, diesel. Class Charlie fires are electrical. The thing with those is you can, once you secure the electricity, you have another class of fire. And then class D fires are metals. The one thing you really want to avoid with any class D fire is putting water on it, because a lot of those metals will, like sodium, will react with water. So you could make the situation much worse by adding, large quantities of water to the situation. One of the things that we, on board ships, especially Coast Guard vessels, they always taught us if you do end up somehow having a class D fire on board one of our ships, there's really no method to extinguish that fire other than jettisoning it off the ship. So a straight stream with a high pressure fire hose to try to blow that piece of metal off of the deck. Hopefully it's outside and into the water. The thing with metals is they create their own oxygen, so they kind of become self-sustaining. And the reason I picked that slide background is because a lot of times you can tell the type of fire that you have by the color of the flames. So your, class alpha fires, they're going to have that normal, red, orange colored flame. Alcohols, when they burn, really the flame is almost invisible, somewhat blue. Electrical fires are going to have some, blue in the fire. So, and then metals put off, depending on the metal, they'll put off different color flames. So this was an example of a Bravo fire that I worked just, a year after I joined the Coast Guard. My ship had gone, we were home ported out of Key West, but we went to Tampa to fill in for another cutter. And while we were there, 3 vessels collided. One of them, the one in this picture, was carrying jet fuel and gasoline. So here's a couple more clips from the newspaper, but the tank barge, there was a tank barge that was involved. So 236,000 barrels of gasoline and jet fuel. There was a freight ship that was carrying fertilizer, and then a tank barge carrying number 6 oil, heavy oil. What had happened was the tank barge had ruptured and Tampa Bay was covered in heat and oil. And you can see on my ship's bow where the oil had sprayed up over the bow as we were making our way to the scene. And then that freight ship that was carrying the fertilizer was taking on water and sinking. So we put a crew on there to try to stop the flooding. We were unable to do that, so they ran the ship aground instead of it sinking in the channel and blocking the channel. The marine safety personnel and environmental crews were working the oil spill, and then my ship fought that fire for it was something like 18 or 20 hours straight. We were fighting that. Pretty major fire, very large incident. I drew an arrow on there. That was me up there on the bow. So going back to making sure that the scene is safe and wearing your protective equipment. We were wearing firefighting ensembles, but we didn't. These are the days with older firefighting equipment. We didn't have the self-contained breathing apparatus tanks that you normally see. Instead, we had, it was called an OBA, it was an oxygen breathing apparatus. And so you had to change out cartridges for that. And there just weren't enough cartridges. So we spent that entire time fighting that fire without any respiratory protection, which can be both short-term and long-term hazards to something like that. And that's just another picture of the fire in that barge. You can see the discoloration on the barge where the flames are located. It was a very hot fire. Luckily, nobody was seriously hurt or killed in that collision and subsequent fire. So some of your agents that you would use for different fires. For class alpha, your most common agent that you're going to put on that is going to be a water. Class Bravo is you're going to try to either use a dry chemical extinguisher, which interrupts the chemical chain reaction, or you try to smother them. And then we used aqueous film forming foam, AFFF. There's a number of different foams that are used a lot of times by airports and then of course ships. Those foams make a vapor barrier so that petroleum product is floating on the water. Your flames are coming off of that product. When you put that foam on it, it makes a barrier in between the vapors and oxygen. So basically smothers the fire. The thing with that is is once you have a foam blanket down and the fire is extinguished, you never want to break that foam barrier, because just like with a backdraft, the heat is still there, the fuel is still there, you're just keeping the oxygen away. So if you break that foam, it's going to erupt back into flame again until the space is cool. Class Charlie fires, you would just want to secure the electricity and then use the best agent to use on a Charlie fire is CO2. And that's because it doesn't leave any residue behind. It doesn't leave, the powder, or you want to avoid spraying water onto an electrical fire. Even though the electricity is out, you just want to be safe. You can use dry chemical on it. It's just everything will need to be replaced after that because it's corrosive. And then, like I mentioned before, Class Delta fires, want to use large volumes of sand to smother them or jettison overboard. And then another common fire that you end up with is kitchen fires. So I have another video. I'm going to fast forward through some of this. Okay, so a big thing to remember there is pass. So pull the pin, aim, squeeze, and swipe. So you want to aim at the base of the fire anytime you're using a fire extinguisher, and never ever put water on a grease fire. As you can see in the video, that can be catastrophic. Just a graphic on fire extinguishers. The letter on the fire extinguisher is going to coincide with the type of fire that you're fighting. So type alpha is going to be, like I said before, your cloths, wood, paper, plastics, and ABC can be effective on all three of those types of fires. A BC is carbon dioxide. It's effective on chemical or electrical. And in a type K, you'll see on some fire extinguishers, it's meant specifically for those kitchen fires. I recommend every kitchen and every galley on board a boat should have a fire extinguisher for a type K fire. Another thing with fires, they go through different growth stages. The growth stage is the very beginning of the fire. It's when the fire is just growing, and then it's going to reach a point where it's going to flash over, and that's when the entire compartment or entire room transitions into a state where every surface is on fire. So basically, your gases and your heat build up to a point where anything that's flammable within that room is going to eventually just reach that point, and it's going to flash. When it does flash, it's in the fully developed stage. And there's no putting that out except by a fire department if they can get there on time. And then once everything dies down, it's basically run its course and eliminated all of its fuel. It goes into the decay stage where it's smoldering. And then I have another video here to show why it's important to always water your Christmas trees every day. So there's a small flame down here in the corner. And once it builds up enough heat, it rapidly engulfs this entire room. Right now, it's still in the growth stage, but very shortly, it's going to go into where it flashes over. This table here is about to go. And at this point, we're not even a minute into it. Everything inside that room. Another hazard that I had put on one of the earlier screens was the chemicals that are given off by fire. This is just the fire department putting that fire out. So all of those materials, the table, those couches, the foam that they're made out of, the synthetic materials, all of that puts off different, well, they're all made out of different chemicals. And so whenever they burn, they put off chemicals, and then those chemicals mix with other chemicals being put off from other materials. It's very, very hazardous. So you don't want to breathe in that smoke. It's not like, a campfire. All those chemicals have very serious long-term consequences, health consequences like cancer, lung disease. You always want to make sure that you have those your proper protective equipment on. Anytime you're around, or anyone who becomes a firefighter, fighting a fire later on in their lives, want to protect themselves. So this is another hazard associated with class alpha fires. So this was a coal-fired power plant that was right next to my station in Chicago. So anytime you have materials that are suspended in the air and as a dust, they become explosive. This happened to be coal. And as you can see, there's a big section of the power plant over here that was blown off from the side of it. And then there was a large section of the roof that was blown off. But the same thing can happen for any material that can be in a dust form. It happens somewhat frequently with grains, like grain silos on farms. The dust from the grains becomes suspended inside a silo, and it's an explosive environment, just because there's so much surface area on that dust, and it's suspended within, air, oxygen. Any spark can cause that explosion. And then this was my one of my ships that I was stationed on. This one was out of Mississippi, and during Hurricane Katrina, we had to get underway to avoid the hurricane. We had stabilizer fins, and one of those fins blew the hydraulic line and sprayed high pressure hydraulic fluid into the engine room, into the atmosphere. So you had hot surfaces all over the engine room. And then you had atomized hydraulic fluid in the air. So it didn't flash, thankfully, but you don't need a fire to treat something like it's a fire. We went in there as if the engine room was on fire to take care of the situation and make sure that we didn't have an explosion. We ended up ventilating, of course, securing the hydraulics, and but ventilated the space and was able to prevent a disaster. I don't know who would have come after the Coast Guard in the middle of Hurricane Katrina. Pretty sure we would have been on our own for at least a while. So we wanted to make sure that we were able to take care of that situation. This was a vessel fire that, while I was in Detroit, in a marina, this boat had caught fire. Fiberglass is very difficult to put out. I'm probably accurate to say that I've never fought a fiberglass boat fire and actually put the boat out. I had one in Chicago where we were trying to extinguish it, and this was when the Coast Guard still fought. Our firefighting policy now is to get people safe. And a lot of that is due to the fact that fiberglass is difficult to put out. But in Chicago, we were trying to put a boat out, and it was out in open water, and we didn't have enough volume of water from our boat to do it. And the Chicago Fire Department came up with their large firefighting vessel and ended up putting so much water on it that they sank the boat. So that's another consideration that you need to have whenever you're working, fighting a fire on board a boat. The water that you put into the boat becomes a hazard in itself. You always have to make sure that you have some way of removing quantities of water if you're fighting a fire on your own boat, so that, because you're going to end up sinking it if you don't remove it. But this one was in Detroit. We took the line off and then towed the vessel out of the marina and into open water, where it continued to burn under supervision of both us and Detroit Fire Department. And then once it burned to the water line, then the Detroit River put the fire out, and then the wreckage was towed in. It's a little on fire prevention. One of the easiest things that you can do to prevent a fire is just keep areas clean. Don't have clutter. If there's spilled grease or oil, clean it up. That's important to keep a fire from starting, and it's also important so that you can egress out of the area if a fire does happen. You can make it to safety, as well as it helps the firefighters that are going to be going there to extinguish it. If they can't make it through an area because they're in zero visibility and there's clutter everywhere, it's going to be very detrimental to their efforts. And then, especially in front of places like breaker panels, utility shutoffs, firefighters are going to need to be able to shut off the electricity in an area. You want to make sure that they have access to be able to do that. If you have organic materials like oils and greases and things, and they're on a rag, and you bunch those rags up and put them in the garbage, it's called spontaneous combustion. That material will give off heat, and that heat is trapped inside the bunched up rag until it gets to the point where there's enough heat to flash whatever material it is, whatever oil or grease is on it, and then you get a fire starting in a trash can. So you never want to just throw those away. You want to dispose of them properly. You want to be aware of electrical safety and be watchful for fuel oil sprays, just like that hydraulic oil that I had on Coast Guard cutter Shamal. And then you want to keep fuels away from areas that are prone to fires. So areas where you have water heaters and furnaces, where you might have an open flame, or you might get a spark. You don't want to store things like gasoline, flammable liquids, or propane tanks or anything like that in areas where you have those open flames and sources of ignition. That's a good way of starting a fire that would be very difficult to extinguish right off the bat. And for boat specific, so gasoline engines, they're equipped with backfire flame arrestors, and in the engine rooms, engine spaces on them have installed ventilation. So I'm talking about boats other than with outboard engines. They're going to have a flame arrestor on there so that if there is it'll prevent flame from backing into the engine space and causing an explosion. So the installed ventilation has to be run before hitting the ignition for an engine. Running that installed ventilation is going to remove any gasoline vapors that have built up inside the engine room. I've seen a number of cases where people didn't run the ventilation, and then those gasoline vapors had built up. When they started their boat, there was a spark, the boat blew up. I recently, just within the last few years, went down to Brunswick, Georgia to work on a salvage case for a car carrier that had overturned one of the contractor boats that was helping us with that case. Went to start their engine. They didn't run the ventilation, and there was a cooler sitting on the engine room hatch, and then a man sitting on top of that cooler. When they turned the ignition key, it ignited the vapors that was in the engine room, and it blew, like it says there, a 200-pound crewman and that cooler probably 20 feet in the air. He wasn't seriously injured, but he was injured. It could have been far, far worse than what it was. Running that installed ventilation is very important. And I'm going to show you, this is what a backfire flame arrestor looks like. And then this video here is going to be why we want to run our ventilation. You're going to see here in a bit what happens when you don't run your ventilation and you turn your engine. I think it said that this happened in Italy. So that concludes my presentation. I'm here for any questions that might be asked. PJ, are you still there?
Absolutely. That was a wonderful presentation. So just a reminder, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat box. And I've been taking some questions during the presentation to start off. So give you some time to think and get your questions answered via the chat. I think this question was probably related to maybe the backdraft portion. So even after attacking a fire with a fire extinguisher and it looks out, the fire can reignite. So how do we know when a fire is actually out?
Your best bet is to not even try. You want to call 911 and let the firefighters come in and let them examine it. A lot of times what ends up happening is people think a fire is out, especially something like an electrical fire that might be in the wall. But a fire can remain like between the walls of a house, smoldering, and then it pops back out again later. So your best bet is call 911, get the fire department there, and let them make that determination.
Okay. I think this kind of goes along with that question. So say it's a recreational boater that has a fire extinguisher aboard, the correct type of fire extinguisher. They know where it is, readily accessible. In reality, say a common scenario, there's some smoke coming from a hatch. How long does the boater have really to engage that fire with the fire extinguisher before you get a situation like some of the videos and pictures that we saw where really you just have to abandon ship at that point?
So like I said, the first thing you want to do is call for help. Get help coming there. If it's a boat, when you call the Coast Guard or any of you just call for help, Mayday on radio. There's going to be multiple agencies coming. If it's not safe to fight the fire, don't close the doors and hatches, try to seal it in. That'll buy you time. I've gone to a number of incidents where there was a fire and then they were able to secure the fire in one section of the boat. It basically move to the bow and wait for help. The boat's still on fire, but they're as far away as they could be safely before abandoning ship. And even if you do have to abandon ship, try to stay as close to the boat as you can, because it's a lot easier to find, a boat on fire than it is to find individual people floating in the water. You just want to be on the windward side of it so that it's blowing the smoke and flame and the boat itself away from you and not on top of you.
Really good advice for it could be a very scary situation for sure.
And put your life jacket on.
Should be on already, right?
That's right.
That's right. We should be wearing them always on when we're underway. All right. Another question. So you had mentioned organic materials and properly disposing of them. So how should we dispose of rags containing organic materials? What is the proper disposal?
Well, places that deal in large volumes of them, they have a company that would come in and they collect them to take them away. Like our engineers at the area where I work, when they do maintenance on the boat, they have specialized containers for them. And then they have a company that comes in and disposes of them. For most of us, just laying the rag out to dry, or if you were wiping up something that evaporates more quickly than like motor oil would, just hanging it up to dry or laying it out to dry is one way to be able to do that. And then you also have like in Maryland, there's places that are run by the counties where you can go to dispose of oil, gasoline, and those rags as well.
Great. And here's another one. How about for our portable fire extinguishers? Could you explain how to inspect the portable fire extinguishers and maintain them? What should we be looking for on our fire extinguishers?
Well, if it's one that has like most of them that you're going to buy commercially, they're going to have a gauge on there that's going to show you what the pressure is on them. Usually you have a green section that is, as long as the needle's in the green, it's good. Dry chemical extinguishers, anything that's being used to, where it's a powder that's going to come out of it, you want to periodically take that and turn it upside down. That way the powder doesn't settle, especially when you're on a boat, and those boats are, on the water, they're constant, they're banging on the waves. That powder gets packed into the bottom, and then you can't, it won't leave the extinguisher. So by periodically, every couple of weeks or month or whatever, turn that upside down, it lets that powder break free. It makes the extinguisher more effective. And then you just want to look at the overall condition of them. You want to make sure that they're in good condition, that there's no obvious damage to them, that the hoses aren't broken or cracked or dry rotted. Make sure that the pin is in it. If the pin is missing out of a fire extinguisher, there's a good chance that fire extinguisher has been expended. So just keeping an eye on the general condition of them.
And also related, another question that came in related to the fire extinguishers. Are you able to talk about the Coast Guard rule changes for fire extinguishers on recreational vessels?
I'm probably not the best person to talk to about recent rule changes. Sorry.
Okay, we can maybe come back to that one. I'll go on to the next one. So we did hit on a lot of causes of fire, both on military, commercial, and private type vessels. And I thought it was interesting. One of the pictures was of a sailboat on fire. And could you talk about maybe some of the more common causes you're aware of fires starting on vessels under sail, since we're usually not dealing with, say, large engine compartments and engine rooms and things like that?
I'd say probably one of the most common causes, period, is electrical. And you don't have to have engines running to have an electrical fire, especially, when you're talking to, if you have large batteries. Batteries are a fairly common source of fire, especially the larger the batteries, the more of a hazard, because you have more energy stored within them. Other than that, like personally, I don't think I've ever fought a fire on a vessel under sail. But I would assume that electrical would be one of the leading causes of that, if it were to happen. Or cooking.
Yeah, the gallons.
The grease fires.
Yeah.
If kitchen fires are one of your, if not your top, leading cause, it's one of the top causes. And like the video showed, don't ever put water on a grease fire.
Yeah. It's interesting the different shapes that the fire takes on. I don't know all the factors, but some of the flames seem to stay very tight and shoot very high into the air, and other flame shapes seem to be, more round and spherical.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of factors influence what the flames look like?
As far as like the kitchen fires, I wouldn't know, other than, some of your variables would be, what kind of grease are you talking? What is the material? And I'd also say the heat, how high of the heat do you have on it? Probably the quantity of the water being poured in as well, and how quickly it's being poured in.
Okay. Well, I can speak, although I'm not an expert on the most recent requirements, but being a vessel examiner, I did see the notice come through on the change that recreational vessels under 26 feet are required now to have at least one B1 Marine fire extinguisher aboard, and over 26 feet, I don't know if there's an end on that, 26 to 40, 2 B1 Marine fire extinguishers. But I'm not an expert on that. I'm just regurgitating from the memo.
Yeah, I don't, I haven't worked on the search and rescue or the enforcement side since I've been in Maryland. My specialty right now is for the last number of years has been aids to navigation. So any recent changes that have come out on firefighting equipment, I just haven't been up on.
Okay. Well, that was great. I'm looking to see if we have any more questions, and I don't see any. So that may be all the questions we have tonight. Well, I do want to thank you very much, Bosun Runt, for joining us tonight and sharing your expertise, and particularly your very personal stories and experiences with fighting fire. Wish you well in retirement. And I think I speak on behalf of all of us, thank you for your long service to this country. It was really a pleasure to have you as our subject matter expert this evening.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. It's always been my pleasure to work with you guys.
Okay. Well, I hope you enjoyed tonight's presentation. And for those of you that view this Tech Talk on YouTube, you'll learn a lot about fire behavior. And a last question came in. I'm not exactly sure what this means. Okay, I can get with you offline on this one, Bosun. Different type of question. All right, so thank you all again for tuning in, and I hope that you're able to join us on March 22nd for our next Tech Talk chart plotting. Have a good evening, everyone.